In the archives of music history, some recordings are more than just songs. They're ghosts, echoes of a final breath, a last creative spark before the silence. For decades, a powerful story has been told about one such ghost, the final demo, recorded by Andy Gibb, the youngest, golden-haired brother of the Bee Gees. The legend goes that for 40 years, his older brother Barry, the patriarch and last surviving member of that musical dynasty, kept Andy's last song locked away on an unlabeled cassette, unable to bring himself to press play. It's a story of unbearable grief, of a conversation left unfinished, a story of a brother who couldn't face the final heartbreaking message from the little brother he called Little Light. But is that what really happened? The truth behind Andy Gibb's final recording is, in many ways, even more poignant than the myth. It's a story not about a tape hidden from one man, but about a song so prophetic and so painful that it took years for the family to share it with the world. This is the real story of Arrow Through the Heart, a love that fame couldn't break, a grief that time couldn't heal, and the devastating cost of being the last man standing. For decades, the story of Andy Gibb's last song was shrouded in mystery and legend. It was said his brother Barry couldn't bear to listen to the recording for 40 years. But the truth is, that final song wasn't a secret. It was a prophecy, a heartbreaking goodbye that, when finally revealed, told the world everything about his tragic final days. Before the tragedy, there was a blinding light, and that light was Andrew Roy Gibb. Born in March 1958, he was the baby, the golden child, arriving a full 12 years after Barry and 9 years after twins Robin and Maurice. From day one, he lived in a world defined by the sonic boom of his older brothers. While they were grinding it out in the tough club circuits of England and Australia, Andy was the adored youngest brother, just soaking it all in. He didn't just grow up around music. He grew up inside the Bee Gees' whirlwind of ambition. His parents, Hugh and Barbara, had nurtured a unique, almost telepathic musical bond between the three older boys. They were a single unit, a three-headed harmony machine. Andy, simply because of his age, was on the outside looking in, but he was always watching, and he was always learning. He dropped out of school at just 13, not as an act of rebellion, but with a laser focus. He was going to follow the path his brothers had blazed. He didn't want to be a fireman. He wanted to be a Gibb. Barry, always the protective big brother, saw the same spark in Andy that he saw in himself. Andy and I were very much alike, Barry would later reflect, noting their shared passions. This bond would shape Andy's entire life. On Barry's advice, a teenage Andy moved to Australia, the same training ground where the Bee Gees had sharpened their skills years earlier. Playing small gigs and writing his first songs, he gave the world its first taste of what was to come. He wasn't a Bee Gee, but he was undeniably a Gibb. He had the looks, the charm, and a voice that carried the family's signature emotional fire. By the mid-70s, the Bee Gees had transformed from balladeers into disco titans. Their manager, Robert Stigwood, saw a golden opportunity. With the Bee Gees ruling the world, why not unleash another Gibb? Stigwood signed Andy to his RSO Records label, and Barry took his little brother under his wing, not just as family, but as his producer and mentor. They brought Andy to Miami, the epicenter of the Bee Gees' disco inferno, and got to work in the legendary Criteria Studios. What happened next was a phenomenon. Barry, at the absolute peak of his songwriting powers, gifted Andy a track that was pure pop magic. I Just Want to Be Your Everything. It was perfect, tailor-made for Andy's romantic, youthful appeal. Released in the spring of '77, the song blasted straight to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and just stayed there. At only 19 years old, Andy Gibb was a global superstar, and this was no fluke. The hits, almost all of them guided by Barry's expert hand, just kept coming. Love Is, Thicker Than Water, also hit #1. Then came the album Shadow Dancing, with a title track co-written by all four Gibb brothers, which became the biggest single of 1978. Andy did something no one had ever done. His first three singles all topped the U.S. charts. He was a teen idol of the highest order, his face on every magazine, his voice all over the radio. He co-hosted the hit show Solid Gold, his boyish charm and killer smile winning over millions. For a brief, brilliant moment, it seemed like the music and the success would never end. The Gibb dynasty had its crown prince. But in the world of stratospheric fame, the brightest lights always cast the darkest shadows. Climbing to the top of the charts is a dangerous game, but for Andy Gibb it was uniquely treacherous. He knew his success wasn't entirely his own. While he was the one on stage, the one whose face sold millions of records, the architecture of his career had been built by his brothers, mainly Barry. This created a profound and ultimately crushing insecurity. He was haunted by the idea that he was just riding his family's coattails. Barry later expressed a deep regret over it, wondering if he'd pushed his brother into a world he just wasn't ready for. He would have been better off finding something else, Barry said with heartbreaking hindsight. He was a sweet person. We lost him too young. The pressure to live up to the Bee Gees' legacy, especially at a time when Saturday Night Fever had made them the biggest band on the planet, was immense. He was a solo act trying to compete with a family harmony that had become a force of nature. This constant comparison fueled a deep-seated depression and a desperate need for validation that no #1 hit could ever satisfy. It was in this fragile state that the temptations of the era found their mark. Miami in the late 70s was flooded with cocaine, and for a young, rich, and insecure pop star, it was an easy escape. What probably started casually quickly spiraled into a devastating addiction. His then-wife, Kim Reeder, with whom he had a daughter, Peta, saw it all unfold. Their marriage collapsed under the weight of it, with Kim later saying cocaine became his first love. His professional life started to crumble right alongside his personal one. In 1981, he fell into a high-profile whirlwind romance with Victoria Principal, the star of the TV mega hit Dallas. For a moment, it was a fairy tale. But the relationship was stormy, poisoned by Andy's escalating drug use. Principal eventually gave him an ultimatum: choose her or the drugs. Tragically, he couldn't make the choice she needed. When she ended, Andy was shattered, spiraling even deeper into an addiction he would never truly beat. The fallout was fast and brutal. His career, which had burned so brightly, fizzled out. His 1980 album, After Dark, was his last. The hits stopped. His unreliability, a direct result of his addiction, made him unemployable. He was fired from Solid Gold for missing too many shows. A leading role on Broadway in Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat ended with him being fired for the same reason. The phone just stopped ringing. The family watched in horror as the little light they adored flickered dangerously. They tried everything: interventions, tearful calls, and multiple stays in rehab, including one at the Betty Ford Clinic in 1985. For short periods, it seemed like he might pull through. He'd emerge, claim to be clean, and talk about a comeback. But his demons always dragged him back under. By 1987, the man who had sold millions of records was forced to declare bankruptcy, reporting an income of less than $8,000. He was a ghost of his former self, haunted by what he'd had and what he'd lost. In the twilight of his life, a time marked by professional failure and personal despair, there was one last flicker of hope. In 1987, after another try at rehab, Andy seemed to be rallying. The goal, as always, was to get back to the music. A comeback was on the table. His brothers, who never, ever gave up on him, were right there to help. Barry, Robin, and Maurice co-wrote a few new songs with Andy, hoping to reignite his creative spark and land him a new record deal. One of these sessions took place in late 1987. Andy was back in the studio, working on what he hoped would be his next chapter. His health was failing. The years of abuse had taken a toll. He wasn't a vibrant teen idol anymore. He was a man weathered by his battles. Yet, in that recording booth, some of the old magic was still there. Among the songs they worked on was one titled "Arrow Through the Heart." Its lyrics, about a desperate and futile search for happiness, would become chillingly prophetic. This recording was different from his polished hits. It was a demo, raw and unvarnished, capturing a moment of profound vulnerability. It represented Andy's last real creative act, proof of the talent that still burned inside him, even as his body and spirit were failing. He was in negotiations to sign a new contract with Island Records in the UK, a chance Barry had helped set up. These demos were supposed to be the first step toward a new beginning. Instead, they became his last word. In early 1988, Andy moved to England, staying at a cottage on his brother Robin's estate in Oxfordshire. The plan was to finalize the deal with Island Records. On the surface, things looked promising, but underneath, Andy was falling apart. The pressure mounted, his confidence vanished, and he started missing meetings with the record company. The deep depression that had stalked him for years returned with a vengeance. Robin would later say his brother just went downhill so fast. He was in a terrible state of depression. On March 5, 1988, Andy celebrated his 30th birthday. It should have been a milestone. Instead, it was a quiet, somber affair. Just 2 days later, on March 7th, he complained of sharp chest pains and was admitted to a hospital in Oxford. The news sent a wave of fear through the Gibb family. For 3 days, doctors ran tests. Barry, Maurice, and his parents were in constant contact, terrified. Barry's last conversation with Andy was a difficult one, an act of tough love, a frustrated plea for him to finally take control of his life. It was a conversation born of fear, one that Barry would regret for the rest of his life, because there would be no chance to make it right. On the morning of March 10, 1988, just 5 days after turning 30, Andy Gibb's fight was over. He collapsed and died. The official cause was myocarditis, an inflammation of the heart muscle. While there were no illegal drugs in his system when he died, the coroner was clear. Years of cocaine abuse had fatally weakened his heart. It was left too vulnerable to fight off a viral infection that a healthy heart would have easily survived. As his mother Barbara later said with aching clarity, when he died, it had nothing to do with drugs at all, but the damage had been done through drugs in the first place. The news was a blow from which the Gibb family would never fully recover. As Barry described it, it was the saddest moment of my life. He explained, that was destroying for the whole family because the whole family really hadn't witnessed losing anyone. The golden boy, their beautiful bright-eyed Andy, was gone. The little light was extinguished forever. In the long, grief-stricken years that followed Andy's death, Barry's life was shaped by loss. The powerful story of him holding onto a private cassette tape for 40 years is a myth, but it speaks to a deeper truth. For decades, Barry carried the silent weight of his brother's unfinished life. The loss of Andy changed the family forever. It was the first devastating crack in their foundation. Barry has spoken often of the immense guilt that haunts him, the regret that he wasn't on good terms with his brothers at the times of their deaths. His last, tough love conversation with Andy became a final, unresolved conflict that he had to live with. As the years passed, that weight grew heavier. In 2003, tragedy struck again with the sudden death of Maurice. Then, in 2012, Robin lost his battle with cancer. With each loss, Barry's role shifted. He was no longer just the frontman of the Bee Gees. He became the last man standing. It was an unwanted title that came with an almost unbearable burden. He was now the sole keeper of the entire Gibb legacy. He carried the joy of their astonishing success, but he also carried the pain of their collective tragedy, all on his own. The grief for Maurice and Robin was immense, but the sorrow for Andy was always unique. Maurice and Robin lived full lives. They built families and created an unbelievable body of work alongside him. Andy, however, was frozen in time at 30, a portrait of unfulfilled promise. He never got the redemption arc. He never got to grow old. The real silence wasn't about a cassette tape. It was about the deafening silence of what could have been. So what really happened to Arrow Through the Heart, Andy's final song? It wasn't locked away. For years, it was simply a painful family artifact, a piece of a puzzle they weren't yet ready to share. Hearing it wasn't a matter of pressing play on a cassette. It was a matter of finding the right moment to let the world hear their brother's last, vulnerable testament. That moment came years later. The song was first heard by the public as part of VH1's Behind the Music documentary on Andy, a raw glimpse into his final creative moments. Then, in 2010, the Gibb family, led by Barry, made the decision to give it an official release. They included the demo on the Bee Gees' comprehensive box set, Mythology. It was a profound gesture. Placing Andy's final solo effort alongside the greatest hits of his brothers was a final, loving acknowledgement. He was, and always would be, one of them. Finally, the world could hear it. A voice, instantly recognizable but fragile. The melody, haunting. The lyrics, a mirror of Andy's own life. I'm a prisoner of a life, a fool for a dream. I'm a slave to a heartbeat, or so it would seem. As the last notes of the demo fade, there's no polished ending. There's just silence, the abrupt, empty sound of a song that was never finished. In that moment, the entire tragedy is laid bare. The song, just like Andy's life, ended far too soon. This was the real pressing play, not a private act of one man, but a family's decision to share their brother's ghost with the world, allowing his final song to become his epitaph. The music of the Bee Gees and Andy Gibb is eternal. It's the soundtrack to First Loves and Saturday Nights for generations of fans, but behind that public legacy is a private one, etched in loss. Barry Gibb's greatest regret, as he's said many times, is that each brother he lost was at a time when they weren't on good terms. It's a pain he will carry for the rest of his life. By releasing Arrow Through the Heart, Barry and his family gave Andy's story its proper heartbreaking ending. They couldn't bring him back, but they could let him sing one last time. As the last man standing, Barry carries the weight of it all, the triumphs, the tragedies, the memories, the melodies. He continues to make music, finding solace in the art that has defined his life, with his son, Stephen, helping to carry the family's immense legacy forward. The story of Andy's final song is a poignant reminder that behind every legend is a human being, and behind every hit is a heart that can be broken. It's a story of a final, private performance, echoing across an ocean of time, a final harmony between brothers, one in the present, one in the past, finally at peace. The bond between siblings is one of the most powerful relationships in our lives. Let us know in the comments what you remember most about Andy Gibb and the music of the Gibb brothers. And if you enjoy these deep dives into the real stories behind music's greatest legends, please like and subscribe for more.